Okay, welcome to another episode of the Diary of a Diversity Champion podcast. Today we have another guest on the show, Malcolm John. Welcome to the show, Malcolm. Welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm very well, Yannick, and glad to be invited onto the podcast. And it's a bit cooler than it has been in previous times, so that's good and that's bad.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming and accepting to stop by. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Can you give us a quick introduction about who you are? Just tell us about yourself, please.
Okay, yeah, quick introduction, maybe tricky, but I'll try and keep it to a minute or 2 minutes.
Yeah,
So I've worked in various sectors of British society. I was born in London.
Mhm.
My parents are from Sierra Leone,
Okay.
West Africa,
Mhm.
and so I worked in the civil service when I started work in Whitehall.
Mhm.
Worked across 3 government departments.
Mhm.
I've worked for a local authority, Harrow, where I live.
Okay.
So there was quite a good work-life balance there.
Mhm.
And I've also worked in the private sector. So I worked for National Grid as a social policy advisor for a few years. So a lot of experience in terms of work across sectors.
Mhm.
Um, and I've often been interested in charity work.
Mhm.
So I've supported charities either as a fundraiser or as a trustee.
Mhm.
And I've actually been on about 8 or 9 trustee boards. And I'm currently on 2 trustee boards at the
Okay.
moment.
Okay.
It's been a work that I'm passionate about and committed to.
Okay. Oh, yeah, very interesting. So, how does Malcolm get into working in the diversity space? Sort of, how does it start? Can you take us to the beginnings? To the early days of your kind of like engagement in this space.
Yeah, Yannick, it's an interesting question because I think that people probably have diversity within them, equity within them, inclusion within them, but often there's no drive to do anything specific about it, based on their circumstances, on their friends' circumstances, and so on. And I guess for me, it's probably always been there when I've supported charities and organizations in my various professional roles. But this specific thing where I founded a campaign called Action for Trustee Racial Diversity, which I founded about 4 years ago.
Okay.
And I've been on trustee boards, and often I've been the only Black or Asian trustee on those boards. And even when there have been others, they've often left for various reasons,
Mhm.
largely around, I think, inclusion,
Mhm.
that they eventually felt that charity wasn't adapting to them and that they had to adapt to a charity. And that's for learned voice can be quite hard and quite challenging.
Mhm.
So the board I was on about 4 years ago was called Anti-Slavery International. And when I was on that board for about 7 years, and the last 3 years I was vice chair. And when I left, when I was about to leave,
Mhm.
we looked around the board table,
Yeah.
and I was the last remaining Black Eurasian trustee on the board.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's unbelievable for an organization that is called anti-slavery. That's quite
yeah,
unbelievable, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was, and it wasn't that they didn't appreciate the issues themselves,
Yeah.
but there was always something else that took priority over diversity and inclusion. So whether it was staffing issues, organizational issues, finance issues. So either I almost got left to the bottom of the agenda
Mhm.
until my leaving actually brought it home quite sharply. So I said I would help them to recruit up to 3 Black and Asian trustees. And the chair was supportive, and the CEO was about a new CEO who initially wasn't sure about the legitimacy of just going for Black and Asian trustees, but eventually I think she was convinced that it was the right thing to do. So we did, we advertised explicitly, and we got a really good crop of people applying, and it was great. And we actually recruited three really good Black and Asian trustees who I think are still on the board, as far as I know. So it was a win-win. And it was then I looked around the sector generally and thought there's a bigger gap. And so I started this particular campaign.
Interesting. So why do you think, in your opinion, there is such a gap in the sector as far as what's the causes? I mean, just top of your
Yeah.
head.
Yeah, I mean, so the stats show that only about 8% of trustees from Black and Asian backgrounds, and the population in England and Wales is 14%. So
Okay.
there's 6%, which is 40% underrepresentation gap, which is huge.
Yeah.
And I think that's largely because trustees currently they're largely white, they're largely older, they're largely male, they're largely university educated, they're largely middle class, and they largely recruit informally.
Okay. Okay.
So therefore they tap on the shoulder people that they know to
Absolutely.
join their boards because they feel A, they feel comfortable with that, and B, they don't know any other way. So that's why there's a gap.
Okay. So the follow-up question then would be, what does it take to close the gap then? Because
Yeah.
obviously if that happens like that informally, so how do you, how do you close, how do you bridge that gap then?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's been something I've been wrestling with for the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
And for me, it's about finding practical solutions, Yannick. And so when we started, we sort of mapped what the issues were in the sector. And it became clear that people who were, after 2020 with Black Lives Matter and George Floyd, there was quite a big drive in terms for people to want to do more, but they didn't know what to do and how to do it. So we identified through a mapping that actually a big issue was lack of access to networks which were not your own. So people from white backgrounds didn't really have any connections with Black and Asian network organizations. So practical solution, really simple, was to say, well, actually, we do exist from those backgrounds. We're not hard to reach. You just got to find different ways of reaching us.
Yeah.
And so we drew up we went on Google, we just searched for Black and Asian network organizations. And we've now got a spreadsheet database of over 500 across sectors, across the UK, often just on Facebook or on LinkedIn, but they exist in droves, in thousands. And our 500 is the thin end of the wedge. We know there's more. But that proves that to people that it can be done if you put some resources and commitment into doing that. So that's the first thing we did. We produced a guide about a year and a half ago, which I largely wrote, called From Here to Diversity. And that sort of built in all my own learning over a year and a half from my process, my engagement. So that's now out. So that's available on my website, or people can buy copies from the Director of Social Change for a mere £9.95. So that's the plug for the guide. And I guess the third thing, so that's on the supply side. That's where you try and change the way that charities behave in terms of trustee recruitment. You raise their awareness. You try and inform them better. On that's on the demand side. On the supply side for aspiring trustees, is how do you change their perceptions of being a trustee? How do you make them think that trusteeship is for them? And so what we now got is a peer support network for aspiring Black and Asian trustees. We've got about over 500 people on that network now, and also first-time trustees. So it shows them that actually there is a path for them. It shows them where we give them trustee opportunities, and we make sure that whenever a charity posts opportunity on our website, that it's inclusive, that it's not exclusive, and it shows to them that they're looking for them as trustees and not somebody else who's not on their radar. So I think it's just looking at practical ways of shifting that dial.
Okay. Okay. So I've got a couple of questions. The first one is, how has the journey been for you? Just getting, facilitating this, the access for Black and ethnic minority groups, trustees in charities. And the second question would be, once those trustees have gained access to those companies, presumably as they would get into those charities, the culture, I'm pretty sure that they would find a culture shock. So how have they been able to adapt to the culture shock that they may have found going into
Yeah,
these spaces? So yeah.
yeah, thanks, Eric. Yeah, no, it's really interesting questions. And I guess for me, the it's been quite inspiring. Um, I've been delighted at what we've achieved, and we've got a pretty good name within the sector for what we're doing.
Amazing. Yeah.
Um, the contacts I made um, across ethnicities has been tremendous. Um, and yeah, so a good example is we've just set up a new program this year called BAFCA, which stands for the
Awesome.
Black and Asian Future Chairs Academy.
Oh,
And
awesome.
not to be confused with BAFTA. But
Yeah.
hopefully we'll have as many stars in our
Yeah.
awards ceremony.
You're
And
you planning to have awards and
uh,
yeah, at some
uh,
point?
absolutely, Alec. Yeah, and
Wonderful,
and
wonderful.
and with your film background, I think I'm sure you'd appreciate that. And what we found is that we've got support from white chairs who are keen to mentor and support aspiring Black and Asian chairs.
Yeah.
And so again, so that's been really encouraging to show that actually there is a way forward.
Mhm.
Um, it's been quite hard work because I've worked largely with volunteers. But again, we got a grant from the Co-op Foundation.
Okay.
That they like the work we're doing, and they funded us to bring in freelancers.
Mhm.
So that's helped. It's gone really quickly,
Mhm.
and but I've enjoyed it. So the second part of the question, in terms of the culture shock,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think it's about red flags,
Yeah.
and I think it's about making sure that if you can, that you don't go into an arena where you're shocked and you're excluded and not welcome.
Absolutely.
The advice is if someone's applying for a trusteeship,
Mhm.
ask a lot of questions. Have a look at the EDI statement of the charity.
Mhm.
Have a look at the current makeup of the board. And if you're the only Black or Asian person going on that board, think this could just be a token appointment.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we recommend to charities don't just recruit one Black and Asian person, recruit two, recruit three.
Okay.
And that gives reassurance. And it also changes the dynamic and thinking on the board.
Mhm.
Um, it's difficult if you do end up in a charity which actually is not very inclusive. The chair's got a big role, and that's why the Basque initiative is about chairs, because actually, unless you change the leadership at the top,
Yeah.
unless they start thinking differently, unless they look differently, change is not going to be very sustainable.
Mhm.
Um, so the chair's role is important. The other trustees' roles are important.
Mhm.
If your lone voice is quite tough, and I've had people who've come to me to say they're having quite a tough time in their charities because actually people aren't listening to them.
Mhm.
And my advice, if it's actually that bad, is to leave,
Yeah. Yeah.
because there'll be some other charity which will welcome you and give you more confidence. So I think, and it's not about you. It's not your job to be changing the EDI culture on that board.
Absolutely.
It's a job of the whole organization.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. So, and do you have any positive stories about, trustees who have joined charities and they felt welcome, they felt like it was an inclusive environment? Do you have any like stories to share with us?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've got loads. I mean, well, one particular one was a woman who was on our HRD, the peer support network. It's
Okay.
called HRD Connects,
Mm.
and somebody advertised for a trustee for a person to join their advisory board.
Mhm.
Quite a big charity, and she hadn't done anything like that before, and she applied and she got it, and she's having a tremendous time in terms of her input and which is being valued and contribution and her own personal development.
Mm.
And yeah, and I've lots of stories of people who've only seen trusteeship through our network and have successfully applied. So yeah, so it's just great to see that there's positive outcomes. I haven't yet had any adverse
Mm.
ones, and I'm
Mhm.
hoping that when people apply through us, because they are actually going into an inclusive environment.
Yes.
Whereas if they're applying something they've just seen in a newspaper, whether it's
Mm.
Guardian or advertised, it may not be for them.
Yeah.
And so there may not be a filtering process
Absolutely. Absolutely.
which will help that journey.
Mm, mm. Yeah, it's all about those connections, isn't it? And yeah, so that's amazing. That's amazing what you guys are doing. So I suppose kind of like going towards the end of the interview, I mean, I always ask my guests about their hopes and if they are hopeful about, the work that they do. And, yeah, so I'm turning that question to you. So what are your hopes kind of, yeah, regarding your work, but not just your work, but actually as far as I suppose the world or the UK or no, let's just put it global. Yeah, let's just go for it.
Yeah. I believe in eating the elephant in small chunks.
Mhm.
So step by step.
Yeah.
So, and in fact, our mission statement
Mhm.
talks about recruiting an additional 10,000 Black and Asian trustees on the
Wow.
charity boards
That's
by, let's say, 2026,
mhm.
because that 10,000 is all that you need to bridge that underrepresentation gap.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
it is. So it's very specific,
Mhm.
but it hasn't been done over the last 10 years.
Wow.
But it's showing people that actually there is a target.
Mhm.
And if you break that down, 10,000, if you take 5,000 charities,
Yes.
we can two trustees each over
Yeah.
3 years is
That's
10,000.
that's it. Yeah.
And 5,000 is actually only 3% of the charities in
Wow. So
Guinea.
that's achievable in
Yeah,
the yeah.
yeah, yeah. So for me, it's achievable,
Yeah.
but we can't do it on our own.
Mhm.
So that's why, again, this whole podcast is raise awareness of what we're doing, working with partners. There's some great partners out there,
Mhm.
and it's that multiplier effect where the more people that do it, the more effective it becomes. And we've recently just been invited to support um, a local authority.
Okay.
Actually, it's a county in England to recruit up to 30 trustees
Mhm.
um, in their local charities.
Mhm.
And that 30, yeah, is a great chunk.
Absolutely.
If times that 30 by 100,
Yeah. Yeah.
then that becomes 3,000.
Absolutely.
So for me, so I'm hopeful that things are changing, but again, ensure that things don't slip back
Mhm.
and that momentum and that impetus it continues. So I'm always hopeful. Otherwise I wouldn't have started this.
Mhm.
But I think it is about monitoring and about making sure there are champions
Yeah.
everywhere that can make sure this work is sustained.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love the pragmatism. I love the fact that, you just don't sit down and you just find the solutions and, try to, just, yeah, propose some solutions, right? Because all too often we have excuses and people are saying, yeah, it's about the systems, it's about, this and that. But, no, I just like the pragmatic. So I just want to congratulate you for your work. First, and then just give you all of my support and my encouragement, for the future. So, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave us with, Malcolm?
No, just say no. Thanks for inviting me onto the show, Yannick. And I always enjoy talking about it. It
Yeah,
encourages and inspires me. And hopefully come back and talk to you about the basket program because
absolutely. Yes, 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 yes.
that's just started this year,
Okay.
and that's really exciting.
Yes,
And I look forward to seeing whether we can affect that change at the top of charities. So,
absolutely.
so thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Malcolm. Malcolm is our champion of the week. And yes, thank you so much for stopping by. And until next time, yes, we out for today. Thank you.